China released a 2.8 trillion parameter AI model over the weekend. It was so popular, it crashed its own servers within 48 hours. And it triggered the worst week for chip stocks since April. Because investors started asking one question. What did $725 billion in AI spending actually buy, if China can do this without US chips? Here is the honest answer. This is not the first time this has happened. DeepSeek did it in January of last year, and briefly wiped out real value from every major chip stock in a single session. Kimi K2 did it again, almost exactly a year ago, from the same country, the same playbook. Both times, the market panicked for a week, then moved on. But this time, there's a specific number attached to the panic, $725 billion. That's what makes this week different. Moonshot AI released Kimi K3 over the weekend of July 18th and 19th. 2.8 trillion parameters, one of the largest AI models ever shipped as open weights. Within 48 hours, it hit its own capacity limits. Not a marketing stunt. Not a soft launch with a waitlist built in on purpose. Server demand outran server supply, immediately, and kept climbing. Moonshot had to throttle access for new users because more people wanted in than the infrastructure could physically handle. Think about what that actually means. A Chinese lab built something so in demand it broke its own hardware, without the export-controlled, top-tier chips that US labs have built their entire strategy around. Developers reported waiting lists appearing within hours. API keys throttled. Some access paused entirely, mid-weekend, just to keep the service standing. That single fact is what started this entire week of panic in the markets. 48 hours. That's all it took. Kimi K3's launch touched off what traders are calling the worst week for chip stocks since April. Nvidia and AMD both fell sharply, in the same stretch of trading days. Not necessarily because Kimi K3 is better than the best US models available today. Because of the question its existence raises. Hyperscalers and AI companies have committed an estimated $725 billion in AI capital expenditure across 2025 and 2026 combined. Data centers. GPU clusters. Power contracts. Custom silicon deals, some running for years. And now investors are asking, out loud, in earnings calls, in analyst notes, in this week's trading, if a lab in China can ship a model this large, this fast, without that infrastructure, what exactly did the $725 billion buy? It's the kind of question that used to stay inside research notes. This week, it moved the actual share price. Traders haven't seen a week like this since April. Let's be specific about who spent what, because $725 billion is easy to say and hard to picture. Microsoft, about $190 billion. Google and Alphabet, an estimated $180 to $190 billion. Amazon, $80 billion, and still rising. Meta, also $80 billion, and still rising. And beyond those four named hyperscalers, tens of billions more from data center operators and GPU cloud providers, the rest of that $725 billion total. That is not a rounding error. That is close to $1 trillion, concentrated in 4 American companies and their supply chains. For context, that is more than the annual GDP of most countries on Earth, spent in 2 years, by 4 companies, on data centers and chips alone. And the honest question underneath all of it is simple, did that money buy a moat, or did it just buy a head start? Here's exactly where that money went. Nvidia built the most valuable company on Earth on one core promise: frontier AI needs Nvidia chips, and no serious alternative exists at scale. AMD has spent years trying to chip away at that premium, model by model. Kimi K3 doesn't disprove that promise outright. But it puts a very specific dent in it. If a 2.8 trillion parameter, near-frontier model can be trained and served without the same US chip stack, then the Nvidia premium isn't just about raw performance anymore. It's about a bet, that nobody else gets close without paying it. Every time a Chinese lab gets close without paying it, that bet gets a little more expensive to keep holding. That is why the stocks actually fell. Not because of one model, on its own. Because of what one model implies about every model that comes after it. Nvidia's valuation was never priced for AI is possible. It was priced for AI runs through us, and only us. Kimi K3 doesn't erase that. It just makes the second half of that sentence harder to say with a straight face. Here's the pattern investors should have priced in a long time ago. DeepSeek shocked the market in January 2025. Kimi K2 shocked it again, less than a year later. Now Kimi K3, crashing its own servers within 48 hours of release, triggers the worst chip stock week since April. Each time, the reaction looks the same: a sharp sell-off, urgent analyst notes, a few days of real panic, and then capex spending continues almost exactly as planned, the following quarter. The White House is reportedly watching releases like this one closely. Wall Street, meanwhile, keeps reacting like each one is the first time it's ever happened. Call it an AI Cold War, if you want the dramatic version. The less dramatic version is simpler: one side keeps spending to stay ahead, the other keeps shipping to catch up cheap, and both of those are working, at once. At some point, surprised stops being the honest word for it. So what did $725 billion actually buy? Not a moat China can't cross. Kimi K3 just crossed it again, in under 48 hours. Here's what the money did buy: speed, reliability, and scale that Western enterprises will keep paying a premium for, whether or not a cheaper Chinese option exists. It bought contracts, government relationships, compliance and security guarantees that most serious enterprises still need, and that an open-weight Chinese model can't easily offer them. And it bought time, the ability to keep shipping the next model, and the one after that, without pausing to see whether the last Chinese release changes the entire plan. That's real value. It's just not the moat that Nvidia's valuation, and every hyperscaler's capex slide, has been quietly pricing in. So here is the honest answer: the $725 billion bought a lead. Not a wall. A lead is worth paying for. Being first still matters, in enterprise sales cycles, in government contracts, in every deal that takes 18 months to close instead of 18 minutes. But a lead has to keep running to stay a lead. A wall just has to stand there. And every 48-hour server crash out of China is a reminder of exactly how narrow that lead actually is. I don't think Kimi K3 means American AI companies overspent. I think it means the story investors were sold, that infrastructure equals moat, was always simpler than the truth. Money buys a head start. It has never reliably bought a permanent one, in any industry, ever. China keeps proving that on a schedule you can now practically set your watch to. Subscribe for daily AI and markets coverage. Comment below: do you think the $725 billion was money well spent, or an early warning sign? Tell me what you'd have done with that budget instead.